Hey everyone, and welcome to our Helminthic lecture. This will probably actually be a couple lectures, but that's okay. So, helminths include your nematodes, which are roundworms, cestodes, which are tapeworms, and trematodes, which are flukes. Helminths tend to live in the intestinal tract generally, but some helminths do live in our blood. And they can get into other areas. They can actually invade our skin. They can get into muscle tissue or even brain tissue, depends. And what they do when they get there is they rob us of our nutrients. So in general, most helminths are controlled in. This is a picture of, and I wrote it down, it's from the New York Times. It is Hindu devotees bathed in the polluted waters of the Ganges River in Varanasi, India. Millions of pilgrims bathe along Varanasi's ancient riverfront, but a stream of human waste flows directly into the river just above the bathing ghats. Steps leading down to the river, and you can see those. Okay, so that's what this picture is showing. So basically you're seeing a place where people bathe, and at the same time fecal matter, urine is running into that same area. So it's not their septic system is not quite developed properly. And so this causes some of the problems, because if helminths are in any fecal matter, now the helminths have a chance to get into another individual just because they're bathing in that water. All right, so when we look at helminths, they can have either a simple life cycle or a complex life cycle. So a simple life cycle occurs when you have a helminth that infects one organism. Let me just kind of do this. There we go. Organism one. That organism releases eggs, and the eggs get into another organism. So organism, two. Okay, that's a simple life cycle. The organism gets into a host, lays eggs are released, another organism gets those eggs. Perfect simple life cycle. When we're talking about a complex life cycle, we have organism one that's infected, releases eggs, but the eggs are then going to be taken in by an intermediate host. So we'll call that intermediate host 1.5, right? And the eggs will hatch, larvae will replicate asexually. So we have asexual reproduction in the intermediate host. And then the larvae are released, and then they get into host 2, which is your definitive host, okay? So the definitive host is where sexual reproduction occurs. And so this would be a definitive host. This is a definitive host, but this one here is your intermediate host. And that's a more complex life cycle. And some parasites have gotten away from that complex life cycle, but not quite. And we'll talk about them in the future as well. So let's look at these organisms a little bit closer. So the first one we're going to talk about are our nematodes. So nematodes are your roundworms. These have a cylindrical body. They have a complete digestive tract that runs from mouth to anus. C. elegans is an example of a nematode. but it is not a parasite. In fact, most of our nematodes are not parasites. The majority of our nematodes are free living, but those few that are parasites tend to be very problematic. And so the first one we'll talk about is Ascaris lumbricoides. Ascaris lumbricoides causes a disease known as Ascoriasis. The females can get up to 45 centimeters in length. So they're long, they're macroscopic, but their eggs are microscopic. They can release up to 200,000 eggs every single day. And so that amount of eggs in 1 year, one female can lay 73 million eggs. So that's a lot of eggs that a female can release from her body. This is the most common roundworm disease. Here's a doctor holding roundworms. You can find these roundworms in pigs and in cows. And actually, if you were a student at Western Illinois University in parasitology, one of the lab activities that we get to do is we get to go to a pig slaughtering factory, and we go through the intestines of pigs, and we look for these roundworms. So the roundworms live in your intestines, and one roundworm doesn't tend to cause a huge problem. What happens though is when you have multiple roundworms, that can cause serious problems with an individual, because the roundworms can actually block their gut or block their intestines, causing serious pain. And if the roundworms if there's too many, then they will actually move around, and they can come out through the nasal or through the oral cavities to try and find nutrients. The next roundworm we'll talk about is the hookworm. So hookworms can live in our intestines as well. They can take in about 0.6 milliliters of blood every single day. They hook onto our intestines, and then they just drink our blood. So if you have 100 hookworms in your gut, that's 60 milliliters of blood every single day. And if you had more, that would be even more milliliters of blood that you're losing, which can cause severe anemia. Examples of hookworms are Necator americanus, or is a Necator americanus. That's an example. The eggs are released into the feces. So they replicate, or they reproduce in the digestive tract, and then their eggs are released in fecal matter. Fecal matter can then hatch, and if the feces are on soil, like on the ground, then the eggs can actually, or the larva can come out of the eggs, and they can move in the soil, and they can penetrate the host's skin. So they actually go through the host's foot, oftentimes, get into the circulatory system. And this is an example of, I said that there are some worms that have a simple life cycle, but not so much. So you have an individual here. Oh, I'm going to show you in a second, but you have an individual one that has hookworms. The hookworms come out with the fecal matter. Larvae come out of there, and they enter host 2, we'll just say, okay? They go into the blood. From the blood, so I'm just going to kind of do this. So they go to the blood, They then go into the respiratory or into the lungs. Okay. From the lungs, they climb out to the trachea, where then they are coughed. You've done that. Everybody has done that. Where you have to clear your throat, like, and then you swallow, and they are swallowed down. And once they're swallowed down, they get back into the intestines, and they're happy again. So it is, they just have one host in their life cycle, you know, but they have to go through this complex route to become mature, which is different. It's still it's more complex than your simple life cycle where you just have a host, defecation, and then the eggs get into another host, and the eggs hatch and the worm replicates again. All right, I'm going to stop on this video right here, and we'll get into our pinworms in the next video. Bye.